morning. A couple things before I get started into this case, and I'll tell you right now, it's a very long case. It's a very sad case. We want to pray for the victim, what she went through, what she's, hopefully recovering from, and that, she lives a good life, despite all the evil that she had to go through and all the evil individuals she had to deal with. And also pray for anybody who's being exploited right now, human trafficking, sex crimes, the terrible hell that they live in. Pray that they get out of it, and pray that there's somebody who has the courage to pull them out of it. To protect the victim, we're not going to name her name, of course. This is still an ongoing investigation, so there's going to be some things that we're not going to be able to answer. There's going to be some things you're going to ask and try to put two and two together, but we want to make sure everybody involved who acted heinously, who's a criminal, gets held accountable for it. The other one too is for our citizens out there, law enforcement needs your help. We're battling human trafficking, we're battling these sex crimes. Deputies on patrol out there, it's hard to spot something like this. The neighbors, the people that are involved, those that see something, that's saying, see something, say something, report it. If something looks unusual, like a teenage girl walking on the street at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody report that. Tell us, because you don't know who you may be saving. It is not normal for a 16-year-old to be walking down the street at 3 o'clock in the morning. When we post something on social media, please take it seriously for missing people. That is critical. And I said, there is evil in this world. And as I go through this, you're going to see how evil people are and how evil they could be. And the last thing I want to leave with before I get started on this is that please remember, Florida statute says you do not need to know somebody's age to be charged with a felony if you have sex with a minor. So whether they said to her, what's your age, or not know what is not your age, or whatever the question was, they do not need to know her age to be charged with a felony. So as I begin, I said with everything, we can't do this without teamwork. Teamwork in law enforcement, teamwork with our citizens. And with me today is Attorney General Ashley Moody. General Moody has led the charge against human trafficking in the state of Florida. Making sure that groups come together. Well, it's law enforcement, outreach groups, partnerships. That's what the general has done. But the other one too is the general has an outstanding group of women and men in the statewide prosecution office. That is who we are working with right now. Those women and men are passionate about this. They're passionate about fighting crime. They're passionate about putting these bad people in prison. But the other one they're passionate about is making sure the victims get help. And I'll get to that later on, but right now the victim is getting help because of the teamwork here. And also with us is Sheriff Nienhuis. Criminals know no boundaries. And neither with law enforcement working together, we work together to try to save people. And in this case, we went into Hernando County, and as we had to go up there to do search warrants, Sheriff Nienhuis made sure that his people were there, right there with us, side by side, because when you hear what goes on here, you have to have you will absolutely have a heart to say we have to help out any way we can. So let me begin. The victim was living with her aunt in Newport Richey. She was living there for a while, and starting in November of 2021, the victim at that time, she's 15 years old. At their house, they hire a pool company, and there's a new pool guy who shows up. His name is Stephen Graham. Stephen Graham's an adult. He is, knows better. It's not like you're dealing with a 20-year-old kid. You're dealing with a grown adult. Stephen Graham is the pool guy. He goes once a week, and he starts building a relationship with this young girl. He basically starts grooming her. And from November until June, he's grooming her this whole time. In June, he ends up having sex with the victim. They go in the woods, they have sex. She's 15 years old, 15 years old at the time. They have sex. These relationships continue for the months that go on after that. So then, November 21st, 2022, the victim, she gets into a fight with her aunt. She runs away from home. Her goal was to get to the pool cleaner, Stephen Graham. She starts walking down the road, walking down Ridge Road. I go back, it's about 3 o'clock in the morning. She gets picked up by Mark Poor. Mark Poor is a convicted sexual predator in the state of Florida. This guy shouldn't have been on our streets. He picks her up, They go, he buys her breakfast. After that, he pays her $40 for sex. Pays a 16-year-old girl $40 for sex. He then transports her to a Wawa, which is State Road 54 and 19. The victim starts walking towards Stephen Graham's house, up there in the corner. While going to Stephen Graham's house, she runs into John Malley. John Malley had just, I guess, come home from a jog. He was out, he's standing there. This is probably about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. Meets her. They start talking. He says, you want to come to my house and have a shower? She goes inside to have a shower and then have sex. Well, after sex, he tells her, hey, I have a young son who lives here, so you can't stay here all day. I don't want him to walk in and see you. So then, you're going to have to leave later on. So around 3 o'clock, Stephen Graham takes her to a 7-Eleven because she had finally got in touch with John Malley took her to Stephen Graham. Stephen Graham and the victim are at the 7-Eleven. While she's in the 7-Eleven, it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she sees DeAndre Poole. She runs into DeAndre Poole in 7-Eleven. They start talking. She eventually, slips him a phone number, some type of way to get message each other, so they get in contact with each other. But she ultimately leaves with Stephen Graham. She then takes off with Stephen Graham. They go down US 19. They find a abandoned Golden Corral, and they have sex in the parking lot. So from there, Stephen Graham says, hey, he can't be here. So she then takes off, and Stephen Graham house, they go near Florimar. Apologize here. Graham, size 7-Eleven. Then she hooks up with DeAndre Poole. She meets back up with DeAndre Poole. Those two then go out. They start selling drugs, using drugs, getting drunk. They're on ecstasy. They end up driving back to the Roadway Inn. They go to the Roadway Inn, which is at US 19 and 52. At there, they have sex, and then DeAndre says, see you later. He takes off. He leaves her in the room. So around midnight, she starts wandering around the hotel. As she's wandering around the Roadway Inn, she meets these two individuals, criminals, Alan Schiavo and Brandon Dunn. Those two, they start drinking, they start using drugs, they have sex, the three of them. So then the evening of November 22nd, the Roadway Inn, this is the same evening, she then leaves, she meets Timothy Colon. And these are chance encounters. This is not like these were setups. This is a young 16-year-old girl, totally intoxicated, totally on drugs, totally wasted, wandering around a motel, and these individuals, instead of doing the right thing, take advantage of this young girl. So she meets Timothy Colon. Timothy Colon meets her. They start talking. They end up having sex in his car. At that point, the victim tells him, I'm 16 years old. Timothy Colon turns around and says, from now on, you're going to tell everybody you're 20 years old. You talk about absolute evilness. This is a person that, you talk about predator, somebody who's going to harm an individual. This person was absolutely, the epitome of evilness here. Total manipulation. I'm not telling everybody else, but to tell somebody, straight up, the girl says, I'm 16 years old, you do something about it. They said something about before that. But this person just says, no, you're going to tell everybody you're 20. And then the evil pit that she's in gets even deeper and deeper and deeper. So then at that point, Timothy Colon says, all right, we're going to go back to my house. Well, he goes to Wise Guy's bar. They go to Wise Guy's. It's an after-hour bottle bar. They drink some more. They're doing drugs. They go back to his house, which is in Hernando County in Spring Hill. Timothy and her have sex. They then introduce Candace Teldogen. Candace comes into the scene. They have a threesome at Timothy's house in Hernando. They then go back to his Pasco house, and the three of them have sex again. They videotape it this time. So then at this point, Candace then starts taking control of the victim. Candace takes her back to her house in Hernando County. She starts giving her wigs. she starts giving her provocative clothing, and she also gives her a stage name by the name of Sassy. So then she starts having the victim go to these strip joints. She's dancing at these strip joints. At one of the strip joints, she meets Jamie Manning. Jamie Manning and her, she's doing a dance. During that time, she ends up having sex with him. Jamie then also travels the next day to Candace's house to meet the victim, and they have sex again. Another place was another club. She meets Stephen Graham. Stephen Graham comes to the club. She calls Stephen and says, "Hey, Stephen, I'm dancing here." Stephen pays her $80. This is the pool guy from the original Start All Over Again. He comes back, pays her $80 for a lap dance. Then they also have sex in the club. This guy just, all of them. I can't say enough how evil these people are. She then ends up at one point going to Wise Guy's Bar again on another night. She meets Jeremy Nano Sky. This guy. Why at the club? He says, "I'm a record producer." She says, "I'm a singer." One thing leads to another, and the next day they link up and they have sex. The other one is these two individuals here at different points in the strip joints. These two meet up to have sex with her too. While she's dancing, they get in touch with her. They have sex with her also. The one comes later on. They're at a house party. It was at Candace's house. Pierre Williams had just been released from state prison. Pierre Williams says that he's interested in the victim. But the victim, she says she was reluctant. She don't have sex with him. At that point, Timothy Colon sees what's going on. From all indications, Pierre says, "Yeah, I want to have sex with her." Timothy tells the victim, "You're going to have sex with this guy." And supposedly there's a very heated verbal argument that goes on. But the victim felt pressured, so she went upstairs and she had sex with Pierre Williams. So day after this, she ends up, the victim's still at the house with Candace. Candace goes to a club, and at the club, somebody pulls up one of the Pasco Sheriff's Office flyers and says, "Hey, that girl you've been hanging out with, she's a runaway, and look how young she is. She's a minor." Candace then calls up Stephen Graham and says, "I just got this flyer. She's a runaway. Get her out of here." They end up going, Stephen Graham comes over. They end up going to La Vista Motel. At that point, when she's out of her basically domain, Candace calls up and notifies law enforcement that this is where this girl is. This is where she's at the La Vista Hotel. Deputies arrived at the La Vista Hotel where the victim is passed out, drunk, on drugs, totally out of it, naked on the bed. So our deputies did the exact right thing. They got her all the help she needs to help her into recovery. This is when our detectives started taking over, because we said this doesn't line up. A 6-year-old passed out on a La Vista motel on 19, on drugs, on this bed. Things aren't adding up. This is where the criminal investigation started. This is where this case broke. And then we were able to start bringing all these people together. But I just want to show you how quickly things can escalate. She was only missing for 2 weeks. 2 weeks she was missing. And all this happened to her. When most people, they watch these movies and they go, "I can't believe this happened." This ain't what happened. This is a sad reality for this girl. This wasn't a movie. This is a girl's living hell that she went through. These are the things: drugs, alcohol, sex, coercion. These are all the things that go on with human trafficking. But this is when I go back to why we do these things and bring it out to your public light, because we need your assistance. When we post those runaways, when we post people out there we need help with, we need help. When you see that 16-year-old girl walking down the street in the middle of the night, make a call to law enforcement. Because it's better that law enforcement show up to try to help that kid than a convicted sexual predator picks her up and starts her down that path to the hell she was living in. These are all the individuals that were involved. These are the charges that are going on. As I go back to, this is still an ongoing investigation. I know there's people watching. I know you're standing here right now going, "What about this? What about that?" All those what about ifs and what about that's are being investigated right now. Because we're working with General Moody's team, we are going to get to the bottom of it. Anybody that was involved in this, we're going to keep coming after you. because that's what the victim deserves here. As a parent, be involved in kids' life. Her aunt had a very tough job. She was trying to raise her, do the right thing. But in general, always be aware of social media, what your kids are on. Always know who your kids are talking to. Hey, I know it's hard as a parent. I know it's absolutely hard, especially in today's day and age. But you got to be involved. Because the more you're involved, the more you know, the safer your kids will be. So with that being said, I want to thank General Moody again. I want to thank Detective Reagan, who's here with us, and he'll be able to answer some questions. But Florida Attorney General Moody has led the charge. When I told her about this case, you could tell when General Moody gets mad, she gets really mad sometimes. She was really mad. She was very upset because I know how passionate she is to protect these kids and make sure that this victim is going to be taken care of. So with that, General.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Sheriff, you did a remarkable job of piecing together in a coherent way a lot of independent situations that are built by a common thread, and that is the victimization of a child. And to have somebody like you at the helm of this incredible agency is so important. We're so lucky in the state of Florida to have you leading the charge here in Pasco County. Thank you so much. And thank you to your deputies that, as they described this case and the work that went into it and piecing it together and the partners that they worked with, you could feel their sense of purpose and passion and responsibility of protection for this community. And that is meaningful to me as the Attorney General, and not just as the Attorney General in a state where protecting our kids is one of our highest priorities, but as a mother of young school-age child, to know that there are people like you in this state protecting them 24/7, it gives us great comfort, and we thank you. Thank all of you here. It is not lost on anyone that today is the day after Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And what is significant about that is it's important to remember that though we recognize prevention and awareness of human trafficking in January of every year, it is a year-round effort. And it is not just an effort by those of us in this room right now that are announcing this case, that are wearing a badge. It is an effort of all of us, responsible community members that want to be a part of this effort, that want to be a part of protecting our children. And what today's case shows is that it really will take not just those who have signed up for these dangerous jobs, these incredibly important positions of being deputies and police officers, but those of us that care about the children in our community and want to be more proactive. What today's case shows us is there are ways that you can. It takes one person noticing something out of place, one person noticing that a child might be in danger and reporting that and knowing how to report that will help us solve these cases and take these dangerous predators off the street. This involved many different adults taking advantage of a young child in numerous ways. And while we're looking at human trafficking charges, statutory rape charges, child exploitation charges, what's important to remember is there were dozens of adults that are not being charged today that did come in contact with this child over the course of these 2 weeks and could have reported this. The silver lining in this case is that this child has been rescued, has been recovered, and is now receiving the services that she has long needed and will need into the foreseeable future. The cases don't always end this way, where a smart deputy responding to a call takes notice, digs in, brings in intelligence and other partners to help build out the case. Many children and young adults, women, live in long periods of time of torture and sexual exploitation, sexual abuse. The silver lining in this case is we had rapid responding deputies that had been trained, who knew how to follow up, knew how to build this case, and that's what we're consistently trying to improve and build upon here in the state of Florida. I commend not only Sheriff Nocco, but Sheriff Nienhuis, whose deputies in Hernando County sprang into action. As you know, human trafficking knows no jurisdictional boundaries, which is often why the Attorney General's office is brought in to assist as this crosses over circuit lines, it crosses over county lines, and we're so grateful for your efforts as well. The operation that led to the arrest of this individual is a remarkable demonstration of the dedication and expertise that our law enforcement officers in Florida have, and that they're willing to work in collaboration with prosecutors. And I have full confidence that my prosecutors will continue working this case. There will be others that are a part of this investigation. I want to thank Rita Peters, who is a longtime sex prosecutor, works with our office. She has been invaluable as we develop and uncover facts and bring charges. Florida is, as the governor has said many times, a law and order state, and part of that is we will do everything in our capacity to protect children. Many of you saw last week I stood at his side as we announced new legislation that would be proposed to come down even harder on adults that sexually exploit and offend against our children. We will seek enhanced penalties. We will make sure that the minimum if you rape a young child is life. If you even have an inkling that you might harm or sexually offend against a child in this state, you may want to think about moving. Florida is zero tolerance. We will catch you, as today's case demonstrates, and you will be put behind bars where you belong for a very long time. I started off by saying why this case is so important, not only in that we rescued a victim, but that the community as a whole needs to see how they can be a part of solving these crimes. Again, there were dozens of people who are not charged who at any moment could have called and reported to our abuse hotline. In fact, in Florida, if you suspect that a child is being abused, everyone has a responsibility to report that. It is your business. Let me repeat that. If you are suspect that a child is being abused in the state of Florida, it is your business, and you do have a duty to report it. And if you see that, you can always call 1-800-96-ABUSE. If you want to be more engaged in our fight against human trafficking, you can go to youcanstopht.com and report human trafficking to 855-FLA-SAFE. As Attorney General, this has been one of my highest priorities, to build better collaboration among our partners, to develop an expertise within law enforcement, to take advantage of our cyber tools and use those to rescue victims. You will see us focusing on this more and more in the coming years. I appreciate the vigor and the passion of the deputies that are with us today. I thank all of you for digging in and learning from this case and moving ahead and rescuing others throughout our state. Thank you so much, and with that, I'll turn it over to the FSA president, not just the sheriff of Hernando County, the Honorable Sheriff Nienhuis.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon. Thank you again. As the General said, I'm Hernando County Sheriff Al Nienhuis. I happen to be this year's president of the Florida Sheriff's Association, and as I'm listening to this, I don't think there's a law enforcement officer in this room, no matter how much experience they have, that these cases don't turn their stomach. You listen to it, and you almost find it hard to believe that this was a 2-week ordeal. It's something, if you saw on TV and on some sort of show or movie and said all this happened in 2 weeks, you go, that's not realistic. That could never happen. And here we're living it. And so I think it's important. A couple things are important to remember. There's a reason that our laws are different for minors, and that's because minors, their brains are forming, they're automatically rebellious, they're very susceptible to something like this from the right individuals who do some grooming, offer them some promise of some excitement. And then, of course, like we see all too often, once they get in the middle of this and they say, whoa, I didn't sign up for this, it's too late. And then they have to become survivors. And they do things and say things and act in ways that they normally wouldn't do. And if you ran into this individual sometime in the middle of that 2 weeks, you might find it hard to believe that she was that age. But that's a defense mechanism, to be able to survive in an environment that the rest of us can't even begin to imagine, much less survive in. So I think it's important to remember, as the General said and as Sheriff Nocco said, that just because somebody may be acting like they're 20 years old and they seem very street smart, That could be because they learned it in less than 2 weeks. It doesn't necessarily mean they're actually that age. And it certainly doesn't mean that they are a willing participant. They may just strictly be in survival mode and not know who they can trust and who they can't. And as we've seen, very quickly, their life spirals out of their control into a situation that is very likely, and we see it every day, people this age, if they're doing drugs, especially if fentanyl's involved, they're going to likely overdose and very likely end up deceased at a very young age. And so that's why it's so important what the general said about if you see something, and Sheriff Nocco did as well, if you see something that looks unusual, if the hair on the back of your neck stands up about a situation, just doesn't seem right, even if there's things in that that make you feel like, well, maybe I'm wrong, I'm overreacting, those types of things, it's still important to call law enforcement. This is a case where we'd rather be wrong and inconvenienced a little bit than be right and have nobody call. So please call. Another thing I want to talk about is, I don't know if they can change the slides, I don't know who's up here, but Timothy Colon, that was our involvement mainly in this case, and our involvement became much late in the investigation, assisting. As a member of the Florida Sheriff's Association, every sheriff's a member. I can tell you that when a sheriff says we need some assistance, whether it's us going to their county or them coming to our county, sheriffs don't ask a lot of questions. Whatever you need, you got, because oftentimes it involves something like this. But I will tell you, from a little bit of personal experience, Mr. Colon is not unfamiliar to Hernando County Sheriff's Office, which I think is also an important point to make, that these individuals are often well-known criminals, and he was recently charged with conspiracy to commit armed robbery. He is well known in our county, and maybe this case will help us solve other crimes that are very, very serious that he may be involved in. I think it's also important to realize that this case had ties to at least Pasco and Hernando County, and maybe at least a couple other counties in that 2-week period. So it is important to be able to work together on these multi-jurisdictional cases. And the Attorney General, whether she's talking in front of a camera or privately, what you see is what you get. She does not tolerate this, and her folks. We had a similar case. Actually, a relative was involved in the sex trafficking of a minor, and she was just as fired up on that case as she is on this one. And so I'm sure that this victim will get justice. But Florida Sheriff's Association works hard at protecting, working with partners like the Attorney General and the Governor, helping keep our young people, who aren't always the best at making decisions, safe from predators like the several you see up here. So again, thank our media partners for coming out, and I guess I'll turn it back over to Sheriff Nocco.
So again, I want to thank General, the Sheriff, and with us today, Detective Reagan. He was one of the leads on it. Sergeant Irizarry and Lieutenant Myers. So their teams, and there's so many other people involved, but we want to have them here because if there's any specific questions to have them answer. But is there anything we can talk about? There's some things we won't be able to talk about because it's an ongoing investigation. The places where she had been working at, there's an ongoing investigation. So just want to put that out there right now.
How's she doing?
So she's at a center right now for human trafficking victims, and she was brought there, trying to get her there as quick as we could. I don't know her day to day, it's one of those things that it takes a long time. I can tell you in general with human trafficking victims, our fear is that, like the sheriff alluded to, in those 2 weeks, she probably transformed way faster, way more than she ever want. How do you take that out of a child? How do you get that? How do you get that? You're never going to remove a memory, but all you can do is help them out. So, this is somebody that, like in any human trafficking case, we're always fearful that they run away again. We're fearful that, she tries to link up with this group or some other people that were involved in it. So those are the type of things. Some all indications, as I said, I don't know her day to day. I've been told that she's doing better. But at the same time this is not something, it's not like you broke your arm and you're in a cast and, you'll be fine. This is physically, she was absolutely abused. Mentally, she was tortured also. How do you help that person that has Stockholm Syndrome? How do you help that person that, doesn't know absolutely what they've gone through, that traumatization? How do you help them out through that?
Talk about this issue in Pasco County.
This is no different in Pasco than it is anywhere else. This is a United States issue. This is probably a global issue in different ways. In different ways, in the fact that I know when we talk about human trafficking, people often think it's people that are being trafficked out of, different countries and brought here for sex slavery, labor slavery. Those things happen. What we generally, unfortunately, what we deal with is a lot of times, there's kids that are in the foster care system, and there's some phenomenal foster care parents. There's some people that probably shouldn't be foster care parents because these kids are going from house to house to house. And what happens is these kids end up going from one location to another. They're constantly being moved, and at some point they break, and they're looking for somebody who loves them. And they find out usually in a guy, such as a Timothy Cologne style person, that takes them in, and they feel like, oh, this person's going to take care of me, and then they pass them off to a person like the Candace Tegdogen, and they keep going down that trap. Those are the things we find. The other one is the runaways. The runaways, like in this situation with this victim, they get caught up in this lifestyle because they don't know how to get out of it. These are kids. We know what kids are like. When they do something bad, they look around, how do I get out of this situation? I don't want to be in trouble. Now, her trouble keeps getting worse and worse, and she has no idea how to get out of it. So the sheriff says she's just surviving. And so this is what we deal with. I see more in the Tampa Bay region. I see more in Pasco is, it's not, there is a human smuggling element. That absolutely is true. What's coming through Mexico, absolutely 100%. That is coming through our country. That, we see more and more of are cases such as this. It's the runaways. But absolutely, human smuggling, that is a huge industry on the border right now where the cartels are smuggling people into this country. And when they smuggle them into the country, they got to pay a fine. So the fee is a couple $1,000s. It could be $8,000, $10,000. These young girls, young boys are coming in. And I'll tell you right now, you never pay off your debt. You're always brought in. So basically, by an open border, all these people are bringing there's human smuggling coming in. These kids are crossing the border. They're in our country, and they're being exploited also. But what we see here in Pasco is more cases such as this.
And I know this is an ongoing investigation, but you're talking about 12 individuals here. They were looking for someone, it sounds like, in most cases.
Oh, yeah, I mean, this guy, what's his name down here? John Malley. Literally, a guy walking down the street sees a 16-year-old kid and says, hey, you want to come to my house and take a shower? Hey, let's start having sex. Oh, by the way, I can't let my kid know because, I want to basically be embarrassed. I don't want to ask him questions. How many more strikes is like, you see a 16-year-old kid on the street, you don't want to invite them in a house. It's stupid. I mean, you're an absolute moron. What is wrong with you? I mean, unless you're just an absolute deviant, which he is. He's an absolute deviant. That's a predator in my eyes. This guy shouldn't have been in society anymore. He should have been locked up forever. Mark Ford, this is all my opinion, is that these people, this is a convicted sexual predator. What is he doing on our streets? This is what General Moody and Governor DeSantis is talking about. These people do not belong back in society again. If you have a house and you have kids in that house, why would you allow predators like this in your house? But we allow them in society. We can't lock our kids in our house forever. We have to let them outside. We have to let them on the playgrounds. We have to let them on the streets. We have to let them walk to the mall. We have to let them, do stuff. But you can't allow the predators to be out there predating on these kids. You have to protect them. But that's what I go back to. These are the individuals we're dealing with. The Timothy Colognes of the world. These people, don't get me started. This guy should never see the light of day again. He honestly should never be making out of prison.
Do you believe that Candace was running some kind of sex trafficking ring? Or do you believe that there are people above her or them that they were answering to that you're going after now?
So we're going to find out. We're going to keep digging into this, see what goes on. So I'll tell you. So a senior in high school can be 18 years old. State of Florida, that's an adult. Candace, I think she was just looking for anybody she was going to, be able to use. Like, we're standing here right now, we're talking because the girl was 16 years old. What if I was saying she's 19 years old? I mean, there's a difference age-wise, there's a difference legally, but if you're a mother, father, grandparent, uncle, or aunt, it's still the little girl that, you help ride a bicycle, teach her how to ride a bicycle, learn how to walk, do those things. But a 3 years difference doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's 25 years old. Basically, it sounds like all they're doing is drugging people up, getting them addicted, taking them to the strip joints, making them dance. I don't know. It's part of the investigation. It's a theory, my theory, but I mean, who knows what she's making off the side of this? If she's dancing, okay, did she get a cut of that money? I don't know. Pardon if I'm screwing up the investigation on this. But that's what you're dealing with. I mean, it's all about, these people, it's all about money and their own pleasure. They're evil. That's all there is to it. So,
How difficult was it to, I mean, this is quite a web here of people who are mostly not connected or loosely connected. So maybe this is a question for the detective, just to try to unravel this web that was created in just 2 weeks' time. Can you just talk a little bit about the difficulty in that investigation?
Yes. So difficulty, absolutely. It's from the moment that we received the investigation and I began my interview and the investigation on December 5th. I mean, me, my team, and Pasco Sheriff's Office as a whole worked collectively. We were able to identify where she visited through video surveillance. I mean, it wasn't until January 28th was when we made our last physical arrest. So, I mean, you can imagine it was long days, weekends, you know, just trying to put everything together, so.
we got time for one more?
Thank you.
It's Detective Paul Reagan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What's that, I'm sorry?
Spell your first and last name.
Oh, yes, P-A-U-L-R-E-A-G-A-N.
Yeah, last question.
How to identify a trafficker? What signs should be considered?
So for I will say, you know, if you're a citizen, you're like, what is a trafficker? What's trafficking look like? It's a house in your neighborhood that always stands out, unfortunately. Or it could be a house that just, you know, young girls, young boys are constantly moving in and out of. You know, things that are going on, weird things are happening. Like the sheriff said, you know, Timothy Colon is not, you know, he's not unknown to law enforcement in Hernando County. Those are type of things to look for. The other one too is, I mean, this girl's going into strip joints. As I said, it's part of the investigation going on. You know, what is happening out there? Why? You know, we're going to be digging into that one. If there's a young girl just wandering down the street when she probably should be in school, she should probably be in bed at home. That's that's something that raises eyebrows. You know, I'll tell you, when our detectives or our deputies are on patrol at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's a young girl in the car with an adult, you bet, like the general said, they're being trained because of her training, the general's training, that human trafficking training we go through. They know now, ask more questions, keep digging deeper. Those are the type of things, but I'll tell you, it's our citizens. We need our citizens out there so badly, because when there's that flyer that goes out for a missing child, you know, share that. Go on there, look at that. When you're in that convenience store, I know it's sometimes hard, but hey, maybe you do remember, you do to see those faces. So that's the one thing. Human trafficking is a very hard crime to say, that's it. I can see it, I spot it. It's the little peripheral things around it that help you identify what's going on in human trafficking, because once you start finding those little things, you connect them together, and then you get into the nasty weave like you see here. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it. God bless you. Paul, hold that door.